Once upon a time, in a small town called Umyuk, there was a big church. Everyone in the town loved going there. The church belonged to a man of God named Pastor Dabe. People called him Pastor Dabe for short. Pastor Dabe was a tall man with kind eyes. He always wore a white suit and a shiny gold cross around his neck. When he spoke, everyone listened. When he prayed, wonderful things happened. The sick people became well, those who could not walk suddenly walked again, and people who had no money became rich. The whole town talked about Pastor Dabe and his powerful prayers. "He is a true man of God," the people said. "His prayers are like magic." Every Sunday, people crowded into his church. They sang loudly and clapped their hands. They gave big offerings to Pastor Dabe because they believed he could help them. And Pastor Dabe became very rich. Pastor Dabe had a big house with shiny floors, many cars, and servants who served him delicious food every day. He had the finest clothes, and everyone knew his name. He was famous not just in Umyuk but in other towns too. But there was a secret about Pastor Dabe that nobody knew. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, he would sneak into a hidden room in the church. There, he kept a black pot with strange markings. Inside the pot, there was a red stone that glowed in the dark. Pastor Dabe would hold the stone and whisper strange words. The stone gave him powers to do all the miracles. But it was not from God. It was from an old mystical power that wanted to control him. One day, a little girl named Obiajalu came to the church with her mother. Obiajalu was very sick and she could not walk. "Please, Pastor Dabe, help my daughter," Obiajalu's mother begged with tears in her eyes. Pastor Dabe smiled, touched the girl's head, and prayed loudly. The whole church shouted, "Amen." Suddenly, Obiajalu stood up and began to walk. The crowd cheered and danced. Pastor Dabe smiled, but deep inside, he felt something strange. The red stone had glowed even brighter when he touched the girl. Later that night, he went back to his hidden room. As he held the red stone, it whispered to him, "You will become even more famous, but you must do exactly as I say." The stone's words made Pastor Dabe afraid, but he wanted more power. So, he nodded and agreed. Pastor Dabe listened closely as the red stone whispered its plans. "You will perform even greater miracles," it hissed. "People from faraway lands will come to see you. But you must follow my rules." Pastor Dabe nodded, but his heart beat fast. He didn't like how the stone spoke, but he also didn't want to lose his fame. The next Sunday, the church was fuller than ever. People were standing outside, hoping to see Pastor Dabe and his powerful prayers. As Pastor Dabe stepped onto the stage, he saw a man at the back of the church. The man wore a tattered robe and had a long beard. His eyes glowed softly like candlelight. Pastor Dabe tried to ignore him and started praying for the sick and those in need. The people clapped and cheered as miracles happened one by one. A blind woman saw, a man with a twisted leg walked straight, and a mother with a crying baby suddenly had a calm child. Everyone praised Pastor Dabe. But the man with the glowing eyes watched everything without clapping. When the prayers ended, he stood up. "Pastor Dabe," the man called out, "I need your help." The crowd turned quiet. Pastor Dabe forced a smile. "Come forward, my friend. God's power will help you." But as the man walked closer, Pastor Dabe felt a cold chill run down his spine. The red stone in the hidden room began to glow brightly. Pastor Dabe knew that this was no ordinary man. "What do you seek?" Pastor Dabe asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I seek the truth," the man said calmly. "Do your powers come from light or darkness?" The church gasped. Pastor Dabe laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" "My powers are from God." But the man stepped even closer. "Then prove it," he said, stretching out his hand. "Heal me without your stone's help." Pastor Dabe felt sweat on his forehead. He tried to pray, but the words got stuck in his throat. The red stone whispered in his mind, "Do not fail me. I will give you more power." The people in the church watched in silence. Obiajalu, the little girl who had walked again, held her mother's hand tightly. She could feel that something was wrong. Her mother whispered, "Be still, my child." Pastor Dabe raised his hands, but nothing happened. The man with the glowing eye stepped back and turned to leave. I will be watching, he said. The truth always comes out. As soon as the man left, Pastor Dabe ran to his hidden room. The red stone glowed like fire. You must do more to keep the people under your spell, it said. Bring greater offerings. Build a bigger church. I will make you the greatest man they have ever seen. Pastor Dabe, afraid of losing everything, nodded again. He announced that a special event would be held in the church. He promised that anyone who came would see miracles that had never been seen before. The people of Umyuk and beyond spread the news quickly. They wanted to see more of Pastor Dabe's wonders. But deep inside, Pastor Dabe was afraid. He felt trapped. And in the darkness, the red stone glowed brighter than ever, whispering more secrets and plans. Days passed, and the people of Umyuk prepared eagerly for the special event at Pastor Dabe's church. Colorful banners were hung along the streets, and people sang songs about the great man of God who could work wonders. Pastor Dabe, however, was not at peace. Every night, the red stone whispered to him, filling his mind with strange thoughts and heavy demands. To gain more power, you must give something back, the stone hissed one evening. Its glow filled the dark room with an eerie red light. The people must believe in you completely. You will do something no one else can do. Pastor Dabe shivered but agreed. He had come too far to turn back. On the day of the special event, people filled the church and the nearby streets. Some even climbed trees just to catch a glimpse of Pastor Dabe. The air was thick with excitement. As the crowd waited, drums beat loudly and people danced. Finally, Pastor Dabe appeared, dressed in a sparkling white robe. He raised his hands, and the crowd fell silent. Today, he said, you will see a miracle like never before. The crowd erupted with cheers, but there was one person who did not cheer. The man with the glowing eyes stood at the back, watching closely. Pastor Dabe pretended not to see him. He chose a young boy from the crowd. The boy, named Chimizi, was very thin and had been sick for many years. Come, child, Pastor Dabe said, his voice trembling just a little. You will be made whole again. The people gasped as Chimizi stepped forward, his frail body barely able to stand. Pastor Dabe placed his hands on the boy's head and closed his eyes. He whispered the secret words that the red stone had taught him. At first, nothing happened. The crowd grew restless, but then a bright red light flashed from behind the altar. The boy fell to the ground. When Chimizi stood up, he looked strong and healthy. He even ran around the church. The crowd shouted and danced, praising Pastor Dabe. He is a true man of God, they cried. But at that moment, the man with the glowing eyes stepped forward again. Pastor Dabe, he said in a loud voice, your miracles come with a price. The people stopped cheering and turned to look. What does he mean? They whispered. Pastor Dabe clenched his fists. Do not listen to him, he said. He is trying to bring doubt into your hearts. The man stepped closer, his eyes glowing even more brightly. Each time you use that power, you give a part of yourself away. One day, there will be nothing left but darkness. Pastor Dabe felt the red stone grow hot in his pocket. Silence him, it hissed. You must keep control. If the people doubt you, all will be lost. But Pastor Dabe could see that some of the people were already looking at him with questioning eyes. He had to do something fast. Who are you to question me? Pastor Dabe shouted, trying to sound brave. If you doubt my power, then prove yourself. Show us what you can do. The man with the glowing eyes looked sad, but stepped back without another word. Pastor Dabe felt relieved, but deep down, fear gnawed at him. He knew that the power he used was dangerous. He knew the man was not an ordinary person. Yet, he couldn't stop. The red stone's whispers were louder than ever, demanding more and more. Pastor Dabe announced that the church would expand and more miracles would come. The people cheered again, but doubt had already crept into some hearts. As the days went on, Pastor Dabe continued to perform miracles, but each one felt heavier than the last. The red stone demanded sacrifices, more power, and absolute loyalty. The more Pastor Dabe tried to hide his fear, the louder the whispers became. One night, as Pastor Dabe sat alone in his room, he heard a faint knock on the door. He opened it to find Obiajalu, the little girl he had once healed. She looked at him with big, sad eyes. Pastor, she said quietly, Is the power in this church truly from God? Pastor Dabe's heart sank. Before he could answer, the red stone began to glow again, casting its red light across the room. Pastor Dabe stared at Obiajalu, feeling his throat tighten. The question lingered in the air, heavy and sharp. The red glow from the stone cast long, eerie shadows across the room, and it seemed to whisper louder than ever before. "Go back to your mother, child," Pastor Dabe said, his voice trembling. "It is late." But Obiajalu didn't move. Her eyes, wide and full of innocence, looked straight into his. "I need to know, Pastor," she said softly. "I feel different since you healed me. Sometimes I hear strange things when I close my eyes." Pastor Dabe's heart pounded. He knew exactly what she meant. The stone's power was not just touching him, it was beginning to reach others. "Go," he said more harshly than he intended. Tears welled up in Obiajalu's eyes, and she ran out of the room. The door shut, and the room fell silent. The red stone flared up, its glow almost blinding. "You must not show weakness," it hissed. "Anyone who questions you must be silenced." "No," Pastor Dabe whispered, shaking his head. "She's just a child." "She is a danger," the stone snapped back. "The doubt she spreads can ruin everything. Do not forget the power I have given you." Torn between fear and guilt, Pastor Dabe tried to calm himself. He couldn't bring himself to harm Obiajalu. But he knew the stone's warnings were not empty threats. He had to find a way to keep control without losing everything. The next morning, he announced to the congregation that special prayers and blessings would be offered for children, hoping to calm any worries. The people clapped and cheered again, believing Pastor Dabe was caring for their little ones. That evening, the man with the glowing eyes returned. He waited until the church was nearly empty, then approached Pastor Dabe. "You cannot hide forever," he said softly. "The darkness you serve will consume all you love." Pastor Dabe clenched his jaw. "Leave me alone," he spat. "I do not need your warnings." The man nodded sadly. "I will not force you to see the truth," he said. "But you will face it soon." Before Pastor Dabe could reply, the man turned and disappeared into the night. Exhausted and full of doubt, Pastor Dabe returned to his hidden room. The red stone burned brighter than ever. "You must make a great sacrifice," it whispered. "Only then can you silence all doubters and grow more powerful than you ever imagined." Pastor Dabe trembled. "What kind of sacrifice?" he asked, afraid of the answer. But the stone only glowed and whispered, "You will see." The days that followed were filled with tension. Pastor Dabe performed more miracles, but the joy of the people was mixed with whispers and fearful glances. Obiajalu, now quieter than ever, often came to the church, her eyes full of questions that never left her lips. Pastor Dabe felt the weight of the stone pressing down on him more heavily than ever before. Then, one night, the stone showed him a vision. In it, he saw himself standing in front of an even larger crowd. The people chanted his name and bowed down. But in the shadows, Obiajalu stood, her eyes glowing just like the mysterious man's. She held a small, blue stone that shone with a pure light, and when it touched the red stone, it shattered. Pastor Dabe awoke, drenched in sweat. He knew what he had to do, but every part of him fought against it. The red stone hissed in his ear all night, urging him to act before it was too late. The next day, he called for a special gathering in the church. "We must rid ourselves of all doubt and weakness," he announced. "Only then can we become truly strong." But as he spoke, his gaze fell on Obiajalu, standing with her mother. She was listening carefully, and Pastor Dabe felt something stir inside him, a flicker of the man he used to be, a man who truly wanted to help people. Yet, the red stone's glow grew hotter in his pocket, and the whispers became unbearable. Would he follow the stone's dark demands, or would he find a way to break free? Pastor Dabe's heart raced as he stood before the congregation. The red stone's whispers grew louder, demanding that he act. He looked out at the people, men, women, children, all of them filled with faith and hope. Among them stood Obiajalu, her curious eyes watching him closely. "Today," Pastor Dabe declared, "we will drive out every doubt. We will become stronger together." The crowd cheered, But Pastor Dabe felt no joy. He reached into his pocket and touched the red stone, its heat burning against his skin. "You know what you must do," the stone hissed, its glow now visible even through his robes. At that moment, Obiagela stepped forward. She walked bravely up to the altar, and the crowd fell silent. "Pastor," she said, her voice calm but strong, "you don't need the stone." Gasps filled the room. Pastor Dabe's hands shook as he pulled the stone out. Its red light pulsed angrily. She must be silenced, it roared in his mind. But for the first time, Pastor Dabe saw the stone for what it truly was, a source of darkness and deceit, feeding on his fears and greed. "No more," he whispered. He raised the stone high and smashed it to the ground. The red light flashed one last time before vanishing into thin air. The room was plunged into darkness, but then a soft, blue light began to glow. It came from Obiagelu's hands, a small blue stone, pure and warm. It filled the room with a comforting light. The people watched in awe as the blue light spread throughout the church, cleansing every shadow. Pastor Dabe fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He had been given a chance to change, and he would take it. The man with the glowing eyes stepped out of the shadows. He nodded at Pastor Dabe, his expression one of quiet approval. "You have chosen wisely," he said. "Remember, true power comes from within, not from stones or tricks." From that day on, Pastor Dabe changed. He confessed his wrongdoings to the people and worked to truly help them without any mystical power. The church became a place of genuine faith and love. Obiagelu, with her blue stone, grew up to be a wise leader, teaching people about the strength of truth and kindness. Moral lesson: true strength and greatness do not come from shortcuts, lies, or dark powers. They come from honesty, kindness, and the courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult. When we let greed and fear control us, we lose our way. But with courage and a pure heart, we can always find our path again.